The Grand Royal Hotel's presidential suite has become a war zone. Glass rains from a shattered chandelier. Marble cracks under gunfire. Kang Min-jae presses his back against an overturned table, blood on his collar, 3 black-clad assassins closing in with military precision. He has survived syndicates, betrayals, and a decade of blood. Every airport, every hotel, every unfamiliar face could be an assassin. He isn't hiding from one enemy. He's hiding from an empire that has already killed everyone who ever protected him. Tonight, there's nowhere left to run. Then the door bursts open. Not with a weapon. With a mop bucket. Nia, the maid everyone laughs at, the woman guests refuse to let clean their rooms because they say she's too fat to be useful, stands in the doorway. She doesn't scream. She doesn't hesitate. She drops the bucket and charges. One assassin swings his rifle toward her. Before he can pull the trigger, Nia crashes into him with the full force of her body. The rifle slips from his hands as they slam into the wall. For the first time in years, Kang Min-jae forgets the gunfire. All he can do is stare at the woman everyone else ignored. 2 weeks earlier. Nia is just trying to make it through another shift. She scrubs floors the wealthy walk over without looking down. She carries laundry carts heavier than most men could lift. She smiles through insults from guests, from her supervisor, from maids who used to be her friends. Before her shift begins, she secretly slips a meat pie into the hands of the hotel's elderly security guard after noticing he skipped breakfast again. She doesn't mention it to anyone. She never does. Nobody at the Grand Royal Hotel sees her strength. They only see her size. What they don't know is that Nia has spent years quietly saving every naira she can, dreaming of the day she'll open a small bakery of her own, something that's hers, something nobody can take or mock. Around the same time, a new guest checks into the presidential suite. Quiet. Polished. Korean. He tips well, speaks little, and keeps his curtains drawn. The staff assumes he's just another wealthy businessman passing through. They have no idea he's Kang Min-jae. One of Asia's most hunted mafia bosses, running from an empire that wants him erased. In 14 days, one bullied maid will become the last person standing between him and death. Before we continue, subscribe if you love emotional stories with unexpected heroes, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every comment, and I'd love to know how far this story has traveled. Nia arrives at the Grand Royal Hotel before dawn, the way she has every day for the past 3 years, her uniform pressed and her shoes polished even though no one will notice either. The staff locker room is quiet at this hour, which is the only time it ever feels safe. By 7, the insults start. A guest on the 4th floor refuses to let her change the sheets, telling the front desk she doesn't want someone that size touching her belongings. Nia says nothing. She simply nods, apologizes for the inconvenience that isn't her fault, and moves to the next room. Her supervisor, a thin, sharp-tongued woman named Adiz, makes a point of sighing loudly whenever Nia walks past, as though her presence alone is exhausting. The other maids used to invite her to lunch. They stopped a year ago, once it became clear that being kind to Nia meant becoming a target too. She has learned to carry it all quietly. She carries laundry carts stacked twice as high as anyone else can manage, because if her body is going to be mocked, she has decided it might as well be useful. Underneath the humiliation, underneath the tired ache in her shoulders by the end of each shift, there is a small, stubborn dream she has never told anyone at work about. Every month, she sets aside a little money in an old biscuit tin under her bed, savings toward a bakery she pictures so clearly she can almost smell the bread. A place with yellow walls and a bell on the door. A place where nobody will ever look at her and see only her size. That morning, before her shift officially begins, she notices Baba Tund, the elderly security guard at the staff entrance, rubbing his stomach and trying to hide it. She already knows he skipped breakfast again to send money home to his daughter. Without a word, she presses a warm meat pie into his hand from her bag and keeps walking before he can thank her. It is a small thing. It is the kind of small thing Nia does every day that no one at the hotel ever seems to notice. What she doesn't know yet is that her life is about to collide with someone else's. The new guest checks in that afternoon under the name Michael Yoon, a quiet, immaculately dressed businessman who requests the presidential suite and pays in cash for 2 weeks up front. He gives instructions that his floor is not to be disturbed after 6 in the evening, that his curtains are to remain drawn, and that housekeeping should knock twice and wait before entering. The hotel manager assumes he is simply a private man of wealth. He does not know that the man signing the guest register as Michael Yoon is, in truth, Kang Min-jae, a name whispered with fear in certain circles across Seoul, Busan, and Macau, a man who 2 weeks ago walked away from the syndicate that built him, taking with him secrets that could unravel an empire. Nia is assigned to his floor the following morning. She knocks twice, waits, and lets herself in to find him standing at the window, still fully dressed despite the early hour, watching the street below like a man counting exits. He turns, and for a moment neither of them says anything. She expects the usual, a dismissive glance, an order barked over his shoulder. Instead, he simply nods and says, "Please, go ahead," in careful English, and steps aside so she can work. It is such a small thing. But it is the first time in longer than she can remember that a guest has spoken to her without cruelty in his voice. As she cleans, she notices things she isn't meant to notice. A duffel bag half hidden beneath the bed, its zipper barely holding shut over stacks of cash and what looks like a second passport, a different name printed inside. She says nothing. It isn't her business. But later that same afternoon, when Adiz corners her in the hallway to complain, loudly, that Nia is too slow and too clumsy to be trusted with a suite that expensive, she doesn't realize the guest is standing just inside his open door, listening. That evening, when Nia returns to turn down his bed, she finds a small paper bag waiting on the desk with her name written on it in neat handwriting. Inside is a slice of cake from the hotel's own restaurant kitchen, ordered specially and left for her. There's no note, no explanation. Just quiet acknowledgement from a man who has clearly noticed things Nia thought no one ever noticed. She doesn't know what to make of it, but for the first time in a long while, she goes home smiling. Over the following days, Nia begins to sense something is wrong on the 14th floor. She hears him on the phone one afternoon through the door she hasn't fully closed, his voice low and clipped in a language she doesn't understand, but the tension in it needs no translation. Another time, she finds him standing perfectly still at the window at odd hours, watching the parking lot below with the stillness of a man counting cars that don't belong. Once, she notices a black sedan parked across the street for 3 straight days, always empty, always in the same spot. She tells herself it isn't her concern. Guests have secrets. Rich men have complications. It has nothing to do with a maid who mops floors for a living. But then, late one evening while restocking towels near the service stairwell, she overhears 2 men speaking in hushed, accented English near the loading dock. Men she has never seen before, dressed too well to be delivery drivers, asking a bellhop careful questions about the Korean guest on 14 and whether his schedule ever changes. Something about the way they ask, patient and precise, sends a chill down her spine that has nothing to do with the night air. She doesn't tell anyone. She isn't sure what there even is to tell. But she starts watching the hallway outside his suite a little more closely. She starts noticing which faces belong at the hotel and which don't. 3 nights later, she is finishing her final rounds on the 14th floor when the lights along the corridor flicker once, then die. Somewhere below, glass shatters, a controlled, deliberate sound, not an accident. Then she hears footsteps, too many, too quiet, moving with the kind of coordination that has nothing to do with hotel security. Her heart slams against her ribs. She should run. Every instinct tells her to run. Instead, she moves toward his door. She reaches it just as it bursts open from the inside, Kang Min-jae, blood already on his collar, shoving her back with one arm as if to protect her from something she can't yet see. Behind him, 3 men in black step into the hallway, weapons raised, moving with terrifying calm. There is no time to think. There is only the bucket in her hand, forgotten until this exact second, and the closest assassin swinging his rifle toward the man behind her. Nia doesn't decide to move. Her body simply does it, years of hauling carts twice her size, years of strength no one ever thought to respect, all of it crashing forward at once. She slams into him with the full weight of her body before he can pull the trigger, and they hit the wall together hard enough to crack the plaster, the rifle clattering uselessly to the floor. For a moment, everything stops. Kong stares at her, blood on his face, disbelief replacing the calculation in his eyes. He has spent his entire life around violence, around people trained for exactly this. He has never once expected it from a hotel maid with a mop bucket and trembling hands. There's no time to explain. He grabs her wrist, not as a captor, but as someone suddenly, desperately certain that she is the only person in this hallway he can trust, and pulls her toward the service stairs as the remaining assassins open fire behind them. They run. Down 14 flights, through a kitchen loading dock reeking of bleach and old oil, out into an alley slick with rain, sirens already rising somewhere in the distance. Nia's lungs burn, her hands are shaking, and yet some part of her, buried under years of quiet humiliation, feels something unfamiliar rising up beneath the fear. She feels useful. She feels, for the first time in longer than she can remember, seen. They don't stop moving until they reach a narrow guest house on the outskirts of Lagos, the kind of place that asks no questions if you pay in cash. Kong sits on the edge of a stained mattress, pressing a torn strip of cloth against a cut on his arm, watching her with an expression she can't quite read. "Why did you do that?" he finally asks. "You didn't know me. You owe me nothing." Nia considers the question longer than she expects to. "I don't know," she admits quietly. "I just couldn't watch someone die in front of me. Not when I could do something." He doesn't answer right away. Outside, rain taps steadily against the window, and somewhere far off a siren wails and fades. For a man who has spent his life surrounded by people who wanted something from him, loyalty bought with fear, obedience bought with money, her answer lands somewhere he doesn't have words for yet. Over the days that follow, they move constantly, staying only as long as it takes for Kang's contacts to sense they've been found again. He teaches her, in fragments, how to notice a tale, how to read a room for exits, small pieces of a world she never asked to be part of. In return, she teaches him something he seems to have forgotten exists, that kindness can be offered without calculation, that trust doesn't have to be a transaction. Slowly, the fear between them turns into something steadier. Nia stops flinching every time he raises his voice on the phone. Kong stops watching her like she might disappear, or betray him, or want something from him the way everyone else always has. One night, hiding in the back room of a shuttered bakery that reminds her painfully of the one she still dreams about, Nia catches her own reflection in a cracked window, tired, bruised, still afraid, and realizes she doesn't recognize the woman staring back. Not because she looks different. Because for the first time in years, she doesn't look small. Kong watches her from across the room, silent, and for the briefest moment, something in his cold, calculating eyes softens into something dangerously close to hope. Neither of them says it aloud. But both of them feel it. Whatever happens next, they are no longer just a hunted man and an overlooked maid. They are something neither of them has words for yet, and the syndicate hunting them has no idea what kind of storm they've just provoked. The trouble begins with a phone call the hotel manager makes from his office after hours, door locked, voice hushed in a way that would have raised suspicion if anyone had been left to notice. For weeks, he has been quietly feeding information to a contact who pays well for details about the mysterious Korean guest, his movements, his habits, the places he disappears to when the hotel isn't watching. What began as a way to settle old debts has become something far more dangerous, and the manager tells himself it isn't his concern what happens to the man once the information leaves his hands. Nia and Kong have found their way back to the Grand Royal, of all places, drawn by the strange safety of familiarity, an empty wing under renovation, quiet enough to disappear into for a few days while Kang's remaining contacts arrange safer passage out of the country. It feels, for a moment, like breathing room. It is Nia who notices something is wrong first. She has worked in this hotel long enough to know its rhythms, and the rhythm feels off, the security guard missing from his usual post, a fire exit propped open that should never be propped open, the manager's office light burning far later than it should. She catches sight of him through the crack of his door, phone pressed to his ear, speaking too quietly, too carefully, and something in his posture makes the hair on her arms rise. She doesn't wait to be certain. She finds Kong in the stairwell where they've been hiding and pulls him toward the service corridor without explanation, trusting the instinct that has kept her alive this long. Moments later, the building fills with the sound of boots on marble, and the exits she and Kong would have used are already sealed from the outside, locked, deliberately, by a man hoping to trap them both and collect a reward far greater than his salary could ever offer. They vanish instead into the maintenance tunnels beneath the hotel, ancient passageways left over from decades of renovations, dust thick enough to choke on and pipes hissing steam in the dark. Nia leads without hesitation, remembering every turn from years of hauling supplies through corridors no guest ever sees. Behind them, muffled shouts and gunfire echo through the walls, but they emerge 3 blocks away, breathless, alive, and Kong looks at her with something between disbelief and reverence that has become familiar by now. Sitting in the back of a stranger's delivery van they've paid to disappear in, Kong finally says what he's been circling for weeks. The syndicate will never stop hunting him. Every hiding place will eventually be found, every ally eventually bought. If he wants a future. If he wants any future at all, he will have to stop running and end this himself. They find shelter in a quiet countryside villa 2 hours outside Lagos, borrowed from one of Kang's few remaining trusted contacts, surrounded by nothing but palm trees and the distant sound of a river. For the first time since the night the gunfire started, there is nothing to run from, nothing to watch for. Just stillness. It's there, on the villa's wide veranda, watching the sun sink behind the trees, that Kong finally tells her everything. He speaks slowly, like a man unused to being honest, about the family he lost as a boy to a rival gang's violence, about how the syndicate found him afterward, broken and furious, and offered him the only thing that seemed to matter at the time, power, and the promise that no one would ever be able to hurt him again. He tells her how he built himself into someone feared because being feared felt safer than being vulnerable, and how somewhere along the way he stopped remembering the difference between strength and cruelty. Nia listens without judgment, and when he finishes, she offers her own truth in return, the years of guests refusing her service, co-workers who stopped inviting her anywhere, the quiet ache of being made to feel like her body was something to apologize for. She tells him about the biscuit tin under her bed, the bakery she has dreamed about since she was a girl, the dream she never told anyone because she was certain no one would think she deserved it. Kong reaches for her hand, and for a long moment he simply holds it. Then he says the thing that will stay with her for the rest of her life. They only saw your body, he tells her quietly. I saw your courage. Something in Nia that has been clenched tight for years finally begins to loosen. For the first time she can remember, she lets herself believe, not just that she is strong, not just that she is capable, but that she might actually deserve to be happy. In the weeks that follow, their friendship deepens into something neither of them tries to name out loud, something built not on desperation or survival but on the quiet, steady comfort of being fully known by another person and chosen anyway. The peace doesn't last. It never could. Word reaches them that Director Han, the man who built Kong into what he became and has spent 2 decades ruling the syndicate with ruthless precision, has flown into Nigeria himself, bringing his most lethal operatives with him. This is no longer a matter he's willing to leave to hired hands. He wants Kang's betrayal answered personally, and he wants it finished. Kong makes his decision quickly. He will not spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, and he will not let this danger follow Nia forever. He chooses the abandoned wing of the Grand Royal Hotel as the place to end it, familiar ground, and perhaps, though he doesn't say it aloud, a kind of poetry in facing his past in the very place he found something worth living for. He begs Nia to leave before it starts. He tells her this isn't her fight, that she has already given him more than he ever deserved, that he cannot survive losing her the way he lost everyone else. She listens to all of it, and then she simply shakes her head. You stood by me when everyone laughed at me, she tells him, her voice steady in a way it never used to be. I'm standing by you now. Kong looks at her for a long moment, and something shifts behind his eyes. She is no longer the trembling maid who charged into a hallway with nothing but a mop bucket and desperate courage. She has become someone who chooses to stay, fully aware of the cost, because she has decided he is worth it. The final confrontation arrives with the same violence that started everything. Director Han's assassins move through the hotel's abandoned corridors in tight, disciplined formation, and the building that once represented everything Nia endured becomes the battlefield where everything will be decided. Gunfire shatters what remains of the windows. A chandelier still hanging from the ruined ballroom ceiling crashes down in a spray of crystal and dust. Nia doesn't hide. While Kang moves to meet Han directly, she works through the chaos, guiding frightened staff and stranded guests toward the service exits, shielding an elderly housekeeper from falling debris, pulling a terrified young bellhop out of the path of gunfire. She moves through danger the way she has always moved through the world, quietly, without needing recognition, simply doing what needs to be done. It's this instinct that saves Kang's life one final time. As he stands over Han, sword drawn and grief burning behind his calm, one of Han's men lifts his weapon from behind, aiming for the shot that would end everything before it can be finished. Nia sees it a half-second before anyone else does, and she doesn't think. She simply moves, throwing herself into the line of fire and knocking the gunman off balance with the same raw, desperate strength that first drew Kang's disbelieving stare weeks ago. Fury replaces every trace of calculation in Kang's expression. What follows is brutal and fast. Years of restrained violence unleashed in a fight that ends with Director Han finally, permanently defeated, the Syndicate's iron grip broken along with him. The surviving assassins, leaderless and outmatched, retreat into the night. 20 years of running, fear, and blood finally come to an end in the same hotel where Nia once scrubbed floors that guests refused to let her touch. A year passes. Kang walks away from his old life completely, pouring his fortune instead into rebuilding the Grand Royal Hotel from the ground up, transforming it into one of the safest, most respected properties in Lagos. Nia begins rebuilding too, though her journey looks different. She isn't chasing anyone else's approval. She starts going to the gym simply because she wants to feel strong in a new way, works with a nutrition coach because she wants to take care of the body that carried her through everything, and shows up for herself, day after day, with the same quiet determination she once used to survive years of cruelty. Slowly, her strength becomes visible in new ways. Her confidence, already hard-won, grows steadier with every month that passes, not because she has something to prove, but because she has finally learned what it feels like to choose herself. The woman who once hid inside an oversized uniform and kept her eyes on the floor now walks differently, carries herself differently, speaks up in rooms she once would have quietly slipped out of. People on the street sometimes turn to look at her, drawn to the quiet confidence she wears now as easily as her clothes, with no idea that she is the same woman so many of them once dismissed without a second glance. One afternoon, dressed in a tailored white suit, sunglasses pushed up into her curls, Nia walks back into the Grand Royal Hotel for the first time since its reopening. The staff at the front desk, none of whom recognize her, politely ask if she has a reservation. Nearby, a few employees who once mocked her without a second thought whisper among themselves, wondering who the striking, self-assured woman near the entrance could possibly be. Then Kang walks into the lobby. He sees her instantly, the way he always does, and crosses the marble floor without hesitation, a warm smile breaking across a face that once belonged only to fear and calculation. He takes her hand gently and presses a kiss to it, right there in front of the stunned staff, in front of the same lobby where gunfire once tore through crystal and glass. The room falls completely silent. It's only then, watching the tenderness between them, that the staff finally understand who is standing in front of them. The former hotel manager, disgraced and unemployed since his betrayal came to light, watches from near the doorway in stunned silence, the weight of what he tried to do settling over him all over again. Kang doesn't wait for anyone to ask. He simply turns, keeping her hand in his, and says it plainly, proudly, for everyone in the lobby to hear. "Meet the woman who saved my life," he tells them. "And the love of my life." He goes on to explain, to the visible shock of everyone listening, that Nia isn't only the woman standing beside him, she is also his partner in rebuilding the hotel from the inside out, the person whose instincts and courage helped shape it into what it has become. Together, they opened something else entirely a few months later, tucked into a quiet corner near the hotel's entrance. A small bakery with yellow walls and a bell above the door, exactly as she always pictured it, exactly as she carried it quietly in her heart through every year she was made to feel small. Customers line up outside Nia's bakery every morning now, drawn by the smell of fresh bread and the warmth of the woman who built it from nothing but a dream and a biscuit tin full of coins. The hotel thrives around them, rebuilt not just in marble and glass but in something steadier. Safety, respect, a second chance neither of them expected to find. Standing beside Kong one quiet evening, watching the hotel lights flicker on across the courtyard, Nia understands something she couldn't have understood 2 years earlier, back when she was just a maid nobody bothered to see. The greatest victory was never the night she fought off armed men in a hallway, and it was never the fall of a man like Director Han. It was refusing, after everything, to let anyone else's cruelty decide who she would become. If this story moved you, subscribe for more emotional journeys about unexpected heroes, and drop a comment telling me which part hit you hardest. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear how this story made you feel.